name is Ginger Abraham, and I will be your worship associate this morning. We are people of all ages, diverse backgrounds, and many beliefs who come together in spiritual community. We welcome fellow seekers of all races and orientations in working for justice for all and making compassion our ultimate value. We swear by no doctrine or creed, but are guided by principles drawn from world religions, humanist teachings, nature and science, philosophy, and personal practice. Our religion is about love and inclusion. So before we get started, I'm going to ask everybody to remember to silence your electronic devices. Give you a second to pull them out and silence them, so we can have a nice peaceful service. It is good that we gather together. We will now have the prayer. Welcome home. Our opening words today come to us from a UU member, software engineer, and author Mohan Ambar as a responsive reading, so you get to play along. I'm going to the part that says leader, which is in regular type, and you go to the part that is in italics, and you've got to play along. The title is, We Don't Like Responsive Reading. You don't like responsive reading.
We don't like responsive reading.
Responsive reading runs contrary to everything you believe in as a Unitarian Universalist, because instead of formulating your own thoughts and opinions in your own unique way, you simply repeat the words that I have chosen for you.
Like a store-bought greeting card, responsive reading saps us of the ability to choose the words and expressions that we ourselves would have chosen.
Look, I can make you moo like a cow. Or bleat like a sheep. Repeat after me. I will never, ever mindlessly repeat words that someone else has chosen for me.
I will never, ever mindlessly repeat words that someone else has chosen for me.
And I will always take charge of my thoughts by formulating them in my own unique way.
And I will always take charge of my thoughts by formulating them in my own unique way.
Thank you for playing along.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dan Lambert, and I serve this congregation as the minister. And I would like to add my welcome to Jim. It's great to have you back. Jim and I communicated some before we went on a big trip last month, and he called and left me a voicemail one day. And you know how, if you have an iPhone, it'll do the automatic transcription for you of the voicemail? So it said I had a message from Jim Boyle, G-Y-M-B-O-I-L. So now every time I think of Jim, I think of Hot Jim. And let's move from that right into the chalice lighting. That's a good transition. The lighting of the chalice is a ritual that unites Unitarian Universalists everywhere and calls us together here in this space as we gather in sacred community. The flume of the chalice is a symbol of so many of our values, including truth, knowledge, love, courage, sacrifice, passion, and the light of being together in community. Please join me in reciting the affirmation, which is reprinted in the order of service as we light the chalice, signifying our sacred gathering this morning. Love is the spirit of this fellowship,
And service is its law. This is our aspiration, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth and love, and to help one another.
Thank you. I'd certainly like to say welcome to everyone this morning. It's so great to have you here. This is a new setup for us, so we're trying to figure it out without being too awfully awkward and making noise. But like I keep saying, we just are going to get used to doing awkward around here. Because if there's anything I've done for my entire life well, it's awkward. So there's a lot of folks here. I couldn't believe when I pulled into the parking lot this morning and saw that it was already so full, and I knew that there was just a ton of people here for conversation among friends, and it had nothing to do with anybody being here an hour early because you forgot to set your clock. Maybe. And if you're a first-time visitor with us, or if you haven't been here in a long time, we want to say a special welcome to you. It is so great to see you here today. And we would love to have an opportunity to get to know you a little bit. And so at this time, we'd like to invite our visitors, or if you're back for after an absence, a snowbird or whatever, if you wouldn't mind just standing up, telling us your name, where you're from, and why you decided to come here today. This is totally voluntary. We're not holding you to this, and so introverts, you're excluded from this if you don't really want to do that. But if you'd like to, we'd love to know who you are, where you're from, and why you decided to visit with us today. If you don't mind standing, we have a microphone that Tom will bring around so that we can all hear you. Please stand if you. Oh, it's Betty. We know you.
Hi, I would like to introduce my student. I'm a literacy tutor, and I invited my student, Hannah. She's from Poland, and she's a little shy. This is her first time here. Let me turn over the microphone to her. What should I say?
Say your name.
Yes, my name is Hannah.
Good.
12. lucky because she's my English teacher and now she become a Spanish teacher on Tuesday. So I will see how I learn the Spanish.
Thank you, and it's really nice to have you. Thomas, who else would like to say hello?
My name is Claire. My husband and I moved here 5 years ago from Tucson, Arizona. I drive by this place all the time and have gone to many different churches in my lifetime and have not found any that have really satisfied me in my heart. So I've really been looking for a fellowship where people are just themselves and not afraid to be who they are. So, anyway, thank you.
Yeah. Claire, you may have found home. Especially if you like awkward.
I'm Rhonda Wood. I'm a returning snowbird.
And I'm Susan Carlson, and this is my husband Arnie, and kind of a funny story. Wanda and I have these new Liberty trikes, and we live in Solomar over in Punta Gorda, and we were riding them yesterday, and my pedal fell off a little bit away from Solomar, and this wonderful walking woman stopped, and she tried to help us, and she said, well, I can't do this, I'll call my husband. And who shows up? Pastor Dan. And he fixed my pedal. And I said, and I asked her, I said, well, what do you, I don't know, I asked you what she did. What, oh, if he was a motorcyclist, yeah. And so she said, no, he's a minister. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And so he came, and then we asked where, and then Wanda said, oh, that's my church. And I said, well, the least I have to do is come and see, since you fixed my pedal. So here we are.
Hi, Kay. Sorry, I'm back.
Anybody else like to say hello? We're kind of on a roll right now. Good. Well, thank you so much. It's great for us to have visitors. And if this is your first time with us, or if you haven't been here in a while, the first Sunday of each month we have a pitch-in meal after the service. And so there's a lot of food, and we'd love for you to please stay. I know what it's like to go someplace new and to find out there's a meal and you feel awkward because you didn't bring anything, you didn't plan on it. But really, we would love for you to stay and just hang out, enjoy some of our food. We have all kinds of different things to eat. I noticed there's a gigantic table of carbohydrates somewhere in the back. So that's kind of a thing. But please stick around and say hello and enjoy some food for at least for a little while. But it's great to have you all here today. Our opening hymn this morning is number 20, Be Thou My Vision. We invite you to rise in body and or spirit as we sing number 20, Be Thou My Vision.
Be thou my vision,
not expecting that. I apologize. Jim and I are going to take a few weeks to learn how to work together and how things roll with him here. It's great that he had half the choir with him in Singapore, apparently, and brought them back. And everyone's in good voice this morning, so I appreciate that. I want to take just a couple of minutes as we go on to share some thoughts and observations after me being here for a month. I have a couple of requests and just some ideas to share with you. First of all, some of you have noticed that I'm a little furrier today than usual. November is No Shave November in my corner of the world. We talked a lot in October about breast cancer and breast cancer awareness and how that has devastated a lot of people in my family. Well, November is the male counterpart to Breast Cancer Awareness Month, where we raise awareness for man cancers, as they're called: prostate cancer, testicular cancer. Those cancers are just as prevalent and kill just as many men each year in America as breast cancer does women. And we don't talk about them for probably some obvious reasons, but No Shave November is meant to raise awareness of that. And so I will be getting furrier and furrier as the month goes on. When December 1st comes, I will be quite ready to shave, believe me. And I invite all of you who would like to participate. Some of you have a head start, I see, on some good facial hair or wherever else you happen to shave. You know, you don't take the whole month off of shaving, so that's why I'm furrier than usual. Also, it's been great to get to know people and learn your names over the past month. Name tags help an awful lot. I'm not naturally good with names. I can put faces together and say I recognize you from somewhere. But wearing name tags not only help me, but they help everyone else too. So please don't take that as me lecturing you, just a request. Also, I'm noticing the past couple weeks that we're pretty full in here already, which is super awesome. But I have a polite request for those of you who are here on a regular basis. Please move to the front. We've had lots of really good seating, and it's not like a concert or a Broadway show where the front seats cost extra. It's really the exact same admission fee no matter where you sit. But part of the issue is that in places of worship, there's this idea called the 80% rule. And basically it's that whenever a group seating is 80% full, new people don't come because they don't feel like there's room for them. And so if we can fill in the front and leave chairs in the back for latecomers or for visitors to fill in, they feel like it's more welcoming. Because if you come in 3 minutes late, especially if you're fairly new and the only seats are up here by queue, some people might like that, but most people don't want to walk to the front of a whole bunch of room full of folks they don't know. So please next week try some new seats and move forward 1 row or 2, and let's see if we can try this and how it works. And the parking lot is packed too, and I know that we can use the library and walk the half a mile from the library down here. That's kind of a thing. One of the ideas that I've talked about with a couple of the other groups, the board, with the Social Justice Committee, with the Immigration Justice Committee, is starting a new feature in the service that we're going to do fairly soon. It'll be a weekly feature that we're going to call Social Justice Focus. And anyone that has an activity or a group or a protest or a petition or an idea or a cause or anything that you want us to know about that has to do with social justice, broadly defined, please let us know, and we will give you a Sunday to come up and talk for a minute about that thing so that we can be aware. You might want to recruit volunteers, you may need to ask for signatures, let people know that there's an event coming up that you would like for them to participate in, whatever it might be. So look for social justice focus to start happening on Sunday mornings. And if you have something you would like to share, or your group, or your mission, or whatever it might be, please just send me an email, and then we'll work that out in the future. Something else that some of you have pointed out to me in different ways and have talked amongst yourselves about is the appearance of the chancel area. Some of you have mentioned that it's very stark and empty and kind of depressing because there's not much there. I just want you to know that this is a work in progress. What we're trying to do is to create a worship space that is warm and welcoming and spiritual and meaningful while also being aesthetically pleasing. And so we're gonna paint over this. My understanding is that's gonna happen even this afternoon. So next week when you come, there will be a new color. We're gonna wind up with some different embellishments, maybe some banners, maybe pictures of my family. Anything that might help add to our worship experience when we're together. So please know that we are listening and we're trying to make this a really warm, welcoming spiritual space for us as we come together. One of those changes that maybe you've already noticed in the order of service today is that last week, as I was experiencing all of you doing the stones and coming up to share, it seems to me that when we share from the Book of Life, which is a valuable part of this fellowship, that there's an awful lot of other issues going on in all of your lives that you might want to somehow share with the universe, even if you don't want to stand up and talk about it in a microphone. So today, as part of the Book of Life, and after we have a moment of meditation, we're going to invite you to come forward over here to this table where there's stones and the bowl with water. Take a stone and drop it in the bowl. If you have something that you'd like to share, to meditate, to release, it might be a joy or concern or whatever, you're not going to say anything. You're just going to come up and symbolically take a stone and release it into the water as your way of releasing it to wherever it is you'd like for it to go. And that could be positive or negative. But we're going to keep trying some new ideas and some different ways to experience this sacred community together. And the fact is, if we do something for a few weeks and we don't like it, we can stop doing it. If we really love it, then it'll become a more regular part of who we are. So we appreciate your patience and your understanding as we try to work our way through this newness of the transition and a few ideas as we work together to really value what we do in community when we come together on Sunday morning. Does that make sense? All right. So we're good? All right. Hopefully. So in a mood of prayer and meditation, we now read from the Book of Life. Each Sunday before the service begins, you may add joys or sorrows or both, large and small, to be read from the Book of Life during the service. The book you will find before the service begins at a table just inside the door here in the sanctuary, and you're welcome to come and sit in it. In our tradition, we revere the living of our lives as sacred endeavors, believing that the joy and sorrows we experience hallow the living of our days. Today we have one entry to share. Thanks to the Immigration Justice Committee for a fantastic fun evening fundraiser on Wednesday this past week at the Comedy Club, Jackie W. Tess and I were there. It really was great. It was a table full of us, and the room was packed, and the comedian was hilarious. The food was wonderful, and it was a really nice time to spend together. So thank you for sharing that, Jackie. That was a wonderful event. At this time, we invite you to enter into a moment of silence to acknowledge the joys and sorrows, the highs and lows, the celebrations and the challenges that life has shared with you in recent days. After a minute, and I mean a minute, 60 seconds, when you hear the music play, you are invited to come forward to the table here in front, take a stone, and silently drop that stone into the bowl as a symbol of sharing, of honoring, or of releasing whatever it is that's on your heart, releasing that to the universe. So at this time, we'll have just a minute of silence. Tom, is my lapel mic on? I can't really tell what the deal is. You know, again, this is something else we're trying to work out all the time. Is how this sounds. We're good? All right, thanks. Today we embark on a dangerous journey. A dangerous journey to define the undefinable, to agree on the disagreeable, and to understand that which is beyond understanding. We're going to begin a short series called What We Mean When We Say. And today, it's the tiny matter of what we mean when we say God. Dun, dun, dun. Sounds easy, right? During the few years that I've been part of the Unitarian Universalists and I've been in ministry, I've attended the annual summer conference, which is called General Assembly. It happens in June each year in a different location. This past year was in Spokane, Washington. This coming year it's in Providence, Rhode Island. And it's thousands and thousands of Unitarian Universalist lay people, ministers, leaders of different types, officers from all around the world gathering together to share, to learn, to sing, to worship, to get to know each other, and just to hang out. One of the interesting things about that experience to me, the first time I went, is how freely I heard the leaders who were up front in the workshops and the plenary sessions use terms like God and worship and prayer and meditation. And they did that without apologizing, without explaining what they meant, without people getting upset or offended because they weren't using the terms that were okay with everybody else. So my major takeaway from that experience is that at least on some level as Unitarian Universalists, there's some basic understanding and agreement about what we mean when we use those terms that often doesn't exist in local congregations. I've heard, even in my short time here, arguments about we shouldn't use the word God, we shouldn't say worship, we shouldn't say this, we shouldn't say that. And at least at the denominational level, those conversations seems to not be happening anymore. And there are a few reasons for that. It's not to say that everybody at General Assembly, which is also known as GA, we really love our abbreviations in Unitarian Universalism, probably because Unitarian Universalism is 10 syllables long, and to say the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly is like 30 syllables long, so it's just UUGA. Much easier. But I'm not saying that everybody agreed with all the usages of those terms. They didn't agree with a lot of what was said. But one of our strengths as UUs is that we talk about these things together. And it's not to say that nobody gossips or that nobody is judgmental. We have plenty of that, way too much. But as people who are in progress, this is part of the discussion. And to understand that when somebody says a term or uses a word that you don't like or that isn't part of your experience, the knee-jerk reaction isn't to get upset and say, you can't say those things. It's to enter into conversation. And the great part of the conversation is that we can begin by saying, well, what do you mean when you say God? What do you mean when you say worship? What do you mean when you say church? Well, since my first experience at GA, I've asked a lot of UU ministers and leaders, both in Florida and in other conferences and things that I've been to help me understand this. Because I honestly didn't expect that the first time I went. I did not expect to hear the word God at General Assembly. I did not expect to hear the word worship at General Assembly. I did not expect to hear the word church. And those and many other words were really commonplace. The best explanation that I received in one of these conversations was from Reverend Kathy Schmitz, who used to be the minister at First Unitarian in Orlando. She was there for many years. This congregation is probably one of the most, if not the most secular and humanist of our UU congregations in the state of Florida. And she has no problem talking about God and worship and prayer, and her congregation has no problem with that. And the way she explained it is that we learn to translate what somebody says into our own understanding. We do this with the rest of our life, and it's not really a big deal. If English is not your first language, people who learn English, they hear us say a phrase or a sentence or a question, And then in their head, they translate it into their native tongue. They understand what that means, and then they retranslate it back to English to communicate it back. At first, when you're learning, this is a really, really difficult, long, painstaking process that hurts your brain. Isn't that right, Hannah? But then the more you learn, the longer you do this, the quicker that process becomes. And in Unitarian Universalism, what that means is that whenever we hear someone say God or worship or church or white privilege or one of the other many, many phrases that kind of ruffle our feathers, Kathy's saying that I translate what someone else is saying into the way I understand it. And then I retranslate it before I say it back. And I think that's a beautiful way of understanding our task with this. For the past, 10 or 12 years, on Sunday mornings, I have a habit of getting onto a website called postsecret.com. Anybody else heard of that? Post Secret? No, really? Okay, then I can basically make up anything at all. Post Secret started in the mid-2000s as an art project. And the gentleman who started it basically asked people to write secrets on postcards, something that means something to them that they've never shared with anyone because they're too afraid. And he started by posting them in an art gallery. And there was such a strong response that he published a book, he made a blog, he has events where he goes around mostly to college campuses and he shares the millions and millions and millions of cards and ideas that he's received through the years, many of which are funny, some of which are heartbreaking, some of which are very poignant, but they all are a look deep inside the psyche of the people who write these cards. This one was from today's Post Secret. I'm a physicist and an atheist, but I'm almost sure a tree I knew as a child recognized and greeted me when I was back there a few years later. The tree is now dead, and I still think of him as a friend. A physicist and an atheist seeing a tree as a friend. This is that person's attempt to translate God into their life, whatever that term means to that person. It's clearly important. I grew up as a child with a very nebulous and unclear concept of God. I've shared with you that my family didn't go to church. I went to church a couple times with my grandmother, went to vacation Bible school once or twice, but I really didn't know what people meant when they said God. Fortunately, as a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old in second grade, my best friend was a kid by the name of Joe. Joe was a fantastic theologian. And he told me one day, we were talking about God, and he said, it's like this, Dan. Whenever you're born, God and Satan fight over your soul. And then on your 9th birthday, whoever is in the lead gets your soul for all of eternity. That was pretty much my response. I mean, what do you do with this as a second grader? That was sort of my understanding of God for most of my childhood. As a 9-year-old, as a 10-year-old, as an 11-year-old, I had no idea if I was destined for heaven or hell, because I didn't get a memo about who won that fight. There were no highlights on ESPN to go to see how that turned out. But eventually, as a young adult, I went to college, I became a Christian, as I've explained, went into youth ministry, went to Bible college, eventually went to a very conservative fundamentalist seminary, and I was taught in those settings a very, very narrow view of God. I explained to you this idea of God in a box, the theology of who God is and what we're supposed to believe. But I never lost my skeptical and my inquisitive nature. I kept reading, I kept searching, I kept learning. And then when I became a college professor and I was teaching at the undergraduate and at the seminary level, I was teaching a class on atheism and skepticism. And I began a couple of relationships with atheist authors who used to be Christian pastors. And they challenged me to read a list of 10 books about atheism, about skepticism, about philosophy of religion, and suggested that if I took this challenge, that it would eventually cause me to lose my faith. Well, I read those books, it just devoured them, they were so interesting. And I didn't lose my faith, but it did open my worldview to think about God and religion very differently. What I've learned since then is that all of life is a spiritual journey. It's a journey that I embrace and that I enjoy. I was attracted to Unitarian Universalism from the first day that I visited a UU congregation a few years ago. The service I experienced, the hymns, the liturgy, the sermon, all made me think. Think. That means I was using my brain. I was not used to that in my evangelical churches that I had attended. We were to use our hearts, not really think, and certainly not to question. I had to translate what I heard at this UU congregation into my own experience. They sang some hymns that I was familiar with, the tunes, like today we sang Be Thou My Vision. And I was in here as the choir was practicing, and one of the verses that uses the G word, God, and I heard someone, who I won't mention, say, I'm not going to say that word God when we get to that verse. And here, that's okay. No one's going to force you. In the churches that I was a part of for 30-something years, if we were singing a hymn and you didn't sing part of it, the people around you would judge you, saying, this person doesn't believe in God anymore. They didn't say God when we were singing that or when we were doing the prayer. You didn't close your eyes. You didn't do this. Very, very judgy atmosphere. Since that day, I've grown a lot in my theology, in my philosophy, in my work as a minister. And there are a few things I've learned about Unitarian Universalism since then. First of all, we take principles 3 and 4 very, very seriously out of our 7 principles. They read like this. Number 3 is the acceptance of one another and the encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. The encouragement to spiritual growth. And number 4 is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We value the fact that we are all on a journey. We all have different paths that we've taken to come to this point where we are today. No path is right. No one's journey is better than anyone else's journey. None of you have it figured out any more than I do. In fact, I've heard it said that the best theology, or the best way to explain the theology of Unitarian Universalists is, I don't know. And anybody who claims to have it all figured out and can't own that, I don't know, theology, probably is not going to be a good Unitarian Universalist. As long as we are encouraging one another to learn and to seek the truth, there is no judgmentalism here. If you have ever been a part of fundamentalist Christian churches in any way, you know that judgmentalism is just part of that culture.
Amen.
I'm not the only one who's experienced this. But I can honestly tell you that in my time as a UU, even as a UU minister, I've never felt like anyone has judged me, or I've never had anybody say anything judgmental to me about my theological journey. Now, they judge me for other reasons, but not because of my spiritual journey. Your spiritual journey is yours, my spiritual journey is mine, and we are okay with that. That's part of what makes us who we are. Can I get another amen?
Amen.
Thank you. So from now on, anytime I go like this, you, here we are. Like that. Knowing what you believe is great, but so is knowing what you don't believe, and so is not knowing what you believe. I don't know, is certainly valid, and that's part of who we are. So, I like that I get to interpret God however I want to through my own study when somebody says the word God. It can mean a Christian God, a Jewish God, a Hindu God, Baha'i God, Muslim God, Orthodox God. It can mean God with a capital G or a lowercase g. It can mean a male God or a female God. It can mean a higher power and type. It can mean the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars. It can mean the divine within each of us. And it can mean none of those things. And that's okay. That's not to say that there is no ultimate absolute truth, because I believe there is. I just believe it's unknowable in this life, which intellectually makes me an agnostic, I guess. We can't know what the ultimate truth is, but it exists. Just because I want something to be true or something to not be true doesn't make it true or not true, based on my hope or my belief or my emotions. So how do we answer that original question? What do we mean when we say God? To me, I call God the energy of the universe. There is an energy that connects all of us. Whether you believe in creation or evolution, the original force that created everything that exists came out of energy. Energy connects all of us. Even inanimate objects have radio frequency, has energy. It connects everything that we are. Even if you are absolutely convinced there is no God, you still know that there's energy. Energy between people. There are some folks you're just drawn to that you really like, some folks that for some reason you don't quite get along as well with. That's energy. There are some foods that make you feel really good and some that give you a tummy ache. That's energy. There are some forms of entertainment, some music that you really like that help to soothe you or that motivate you, and others that you just can't handle. That's energy. That energy is what I call God. So whenever you hear me use that term, God, and talk about God, what I'm talking about is that energy. And I don't care if you use that with an uppercase or a lowercase g. Whomever or whatever God is, if any such entity exists, it is much more important to realize that we as finite humans cannot ever fully understand that being, whatever it is. All of human history bears this out. Humans have always been in a search for God. We seek, we ask, we listen, we learn, we define, we struggle, we discuss, we grow, we evolve in our understanding. This is part of our human experience. I'd like to close the message by reading a bit of a lengthy poem. It's called A Prayer Poem to the Names of God, written by Richard Fuchs, who was a UU minister for over 55 years, so he's got some experience with this stuff. The poem goes like this. How shall we address thee who art one of 1,000 names yet ever nameless? O Vishnu, Maya, Kali, Ishtar, Athena, Isis, great mother of creation, womb of the universe, the feminine divine. Blessed art thou who hast given life to all and has receiveth us in the end forever thine. Jupiter, Zeus, Apollo, Dionysius, Lord of creation, the masculine divine, in quest of the golden apples of Hesperides, God of ecstasy and wine, reason sublime. Amen, Horus, Aten, Ra, God of beginnings and endings, the soul, the Ka. Soaring like a bird to the light-giving power of the sun, all life is one. Shiva Shakti, yin and yang, the dance of life and death from hand to hand. In perfect balance, the movement of forces as the earth turns neath the stars in their courses. Rama, Krishna, Varuna, Brahma, God of the Upanishads and Rig Vegata, mystic priest, and the Bhagavad Gita. Om Shanti, the lotus and holy vow, creating our karma and reincarnation here and now. The ever-present realization that thou art Buddha, Nirvana, the enlightened one, liberation sought and won in a daily life begun, under a tree or in the sun. To a state of being indescribable, comparable to none. Allah Akbar and Ahura Mazda, there is no God but God, the All, the One. The righteous one, purity of fire, goodness and truth to inspire, fire with fire, quench the evil desire. Let the call ring from minaret to spire. El Shaddai, Adonai, Yahweh, Elohim, the God and peace be with you. Shalom Havarim, 10 Commandments, and the law for Gentile and Jew. The birth of conscience and a day of atonement, to confess, to forgive, to begin anew. Abba, Spiritus, Logos, Son, God in 3 persons, God in 1. God in all persons, prophets, teachers, daughters, sons, and the kingdom of heaven within us. O let thy kingdom come. How shall we address thee who are Alpha and Omega, the stars in their courses from Deneb and Altar to Sirius and Vega? Thou of 1,000 names and yet ever nameless. Let us confess the mystery of thy holiness. Let us proclaim the wonder of the one without a name. Let us the silence praise thee, and the 9 billion stars of thy namelessness. Say, Amen. Our closing hymn today is number 134, Our World is One World. We invite you to stand with us and sing in body or spirit. Number 131, Our World is One World. 134, that's what my brain thought I said. Not my actual said. 134, thank you.
One of the most important goals of the world's faith traditions is to bring humanity closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. One of the goals of this fellowship is to encourage all who gather here to grow more and more generous in both spirit and in action. Each week we take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that supports this congregation and our many ministries. If you are visiting with us today, please do not feel obligated to give. Your presence is gift enough. As the ushers come forward to pass the baskets, your donations will be most gratefully received. some announcements about what's happening in this week to come in the weeks to come in this busy community. The second annual Immigration Film Series is on for 4 Mondays at 5:30 p.m. at the Mid-County Regional Library, one right up the street. The first film is tomorrow, this Monday, November 4th, and the title is The Other Side of Immigration. This documentary interviews Mexicans and explores why they leave their homes and the impact on their families and communities. This 4-film series is co-sponsored by the Immigration Justice Committee and the Hispanic American Council. Please pick up a flyer in the main hall, and if you have any questions, you can see Betty Barriga. For those who purchased art, please pick it up today. And speaking of art, save the date, as the art reception is this Friday from 4 to 6. You can meet the talented artists and art instructors, Nancy Thomas and Skip Maddie. Come support our community's emerging artists. Lori Douglas, who's over there in the choir, will be leaving November 18th for a service trip to Nicaragua. She is collecting donations such as over-the-counter medications, craft supplies, and children's new underwear. There will be a box in the social hall next week. Please see her for details and any donations of money. Thank you. Have you been waiting to be asked to dance? I invite you to let loose and be free. Wednesday here. This is from Samara, for those of you who don't know. Come and move chairs at 4:15, and then we dance from 4:30 to 5:30. If you have questions, address them to Samara. We have reprinted the racial monologue books from last year, and again, you can see Samara. They're $5 each. If you didn't get one last year, you still have a chance to get one. And you can get inspired to write or tell your own story for this year's racial monologue, which will be coming up in March. A ladies' luncheon is scheduled with the ladies from the mosque for Thursday, November 14th at noon here in the main hall. Because of our respect to their religious tradition, the event must be restricted to women only, and the food we provide will need to be vegetarian or vegan. The sign-up sheet is on the bulletin board in the main hall. For any further questions or concerns, you can see Nancy Weaver or Betty Barriga. Our closing words are another poem from David White. The title is Self-Portrait. It doesn't interest me if there is one God or many gods. I want to know if you belong or feel abandoned. If you know despair or can see it in others. I want to know if you are prepared to live in the world with its harsh need to change you. If you can look back with firm eyes saying, this is where I stand. I want to know if you know how to melt into that fierce heat of living, falling for the center of your longing. I want to know if you are willing to live day by day with the consequence of love and the bitter, unwanted passion of your sure defeat. I have heard in that fierce embrace, even the gods speak of God. And now we extinguish the chalice, but not the light of hope, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of community. May those ideals shine in our lives and warm our hearts until we are together again.
Now I'll just add one more thing, I guess, to the announcements. Just a reminder that next Sunday we're going to have a Who Are You class, which kind of used to be the New to You class, but it's going to be at noon after the service. It's going to be about an hour. If you're fairly new to us and you'd like to learn more about who we are and why we believe what we believe and why we're okay with awkward, this would be a good chance for you to come and learn that. There's a sign-up sheet on the bulletin board out across from the welcome table. and we certainly would encourage you to sign up if you're curious at all to learn more about us. And now, as we depart from this sacred space, please remember to be a blessing to everyone you meet. Let's share our community benediction on this, our first Sunday of the month, in which we honor our meal that we'll be sharing as we rise in body and or spirit and sing our community benediction, hymn 1010, We Give Thanks. The words are also printed in your order of service.
So they're here.